Getting a peek behind the veil of some of pop culture's most fascinating circles is always intriguing. But there are some tell-all stories that prove to be so controversial it changes everything we know about the rich and famous. Here are a few tell-all books that were so scandalous that they completely altered the way people thought about their subjects. Confessions of a Video Vixen. Anyone who lived through the 90s knows how big the hip-hop scene was. It wasn't just about the music, it was also about the lifestyle. The world couldn't get enough. And when dancer Corinne Superhead Steffens wrote her behind-the-scenes tell-all, the world couldn't get enough of that either. But Confessions of a Video Vixen wasn't entirely what people were expecting. Sure, there were all kinds of juicy bits involving some of hip-hop's biggest names, including Jay-Z and Dr. Dre, but it went to some dark places too. Her book, and her follow-up books, have focused not on the R-rated fun, but on the industry's abusive atmosphere. When she talked to the Huffington Post in 2015, she said the cycle of abuse in her life started in her childhood and spiraled out of control. She talked openly about self-harm, the cult of celebrity, manipulation, coercion, and what she learned about relationships. That revelation branded her one of the most controversial authors on the New York Times bestseller list, but Steffens has no regrets. Diana, her true story in her own words. The British are obsessed with their royals, but there was something about Princess Diana that captured the attentions of the entire world. The book Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words promised a lot in its title, and it delivered. Author Andrew Morton knew Diana but did his research in secret. They used an intermediary who asked her questions, then passed her recorded responses on to Morton.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
When the book hit the shelves, it wasn't glamorous. It was a story of loneliness, thoughts of self-harm, and a woman heartbroken over her husband's affair. There was paranoia too, and Morton wrote that Diana was constantly worried about the men in gray, shady figures linked to British security agencies. At first, it was assumed the source of these personal details was various friends, family, and other insiders. It was only after Diana's tragic death that Morton decided to reissue the book, along with transcripts of the tapes she'd sent him, which shocked the world again. Morton had been called a liar of the worst kind, been vilified and resented, and subjected to some serious hate. It wasn't until the tapes came out that everyone realized that these really were her own heartbreaking words. Going clear. Scientologists are free to be as weird as they want to, since they fall under religious freedom protections. But in 2013, Lawrence Wright kicked open the doors and published Going Clear, a tell-all book about the organization that went on to be adapted into an HBO documentary. He hit on everything, from the group's billion-year contracts and the fundamental writings of L. Ron Hubbard to David Miscavige's continuing work. The book's influence meant all kinds of fingers were being pointed at Tom Cruise and John Travolta because, as Scientology figureheads, their silence about the abuses coming to light was unacceptable.
If I was to join your cult, would I get...
We are not a cult. We are a church.
Same thing.
Cruise and Travolta didn't immediately jump ship, of course, but Going Clear did help lead the way in exposing every oddity going on behind closed doors in Scientology. Then, Leah Remini piled on with her own tell-all series, further exposing Scientology for its shady practices. If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer. If you want to talk about an ill-advised tell-all, look no further than O.J. Simpson's If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer. Canceled in 2006 and finally published in 2007, the book was met with national furor, more than a decade after Simpson's acquittal for the brutal slayings of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. It described exactly what you would expect from the title. If he'd done it, this was why, and what happened. The book describes a nightmarish relationship and cast O.J. Simpson as the victim. He even wrote how, when an imaginary friend named Charlie spilled the beans about a hard-partying Nicole, Simpson gloved up and went over to the house with only one thing on his mind. Is it any wonder that this one was one of the most controversial, scandalous books to hit the shelves in the 2000s? Reviewers largely agreed that there was essentially no way someone could walk away from this one thinking he was innocent. And even if he was, why revisit such a macabre incident at all? What's the point? Perhaps he just wanted to be back in the spotlight again. LaToya, growing up in the Jackson family. The Jackson family has always fascinated the public, from the earliest days of the Jackson 5. But it wasn't until LaToya Jackson released LaToya, Growing Up in the Jackson Family, that the world realized the full extent of the damage done by success and a father who relentlessly drove his children in the direction he wanted them to go. In the book, she writes about how abusive he was, physically and emotionally. She told the Chicago Tribune that her parents' refusal to meet with her and her siblings and discuss what happened ultimately pushed her to write the book as her way of moving on and starting to repair the damage that was done.
I wish that my heart could speak to your heart, if hearts could speak to each other without us verbally speaking.
Since the shocking allegations in the first book, she's written several more, including Starting Over. That one shocked too, as she detailed her escape from one abusive situation and her involvement in another with manager and ex-husband Jack Gordon. Before these stories were released, it might have seemed like a turn of fortune to grow up Jackson, but now the world knows otherwise. Thanks for watching. Click the grunge icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel, plus check out all this cool stuff we know you love too.